All right, everybody. Welcome back. Clearwater Jazz Holiday's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. Alejandro Arenas. How are you, my friend?
Doing great, doing great.
Thank you for being back with us.
Absolutely.
We are recording these sessions for the purposes of Clearwater Jazz Holiday education and outreach as we do. Alejandro is here today with a topic that we are calling harmony from a bass perspective. Alejandro has done several sessions with us. They are all fantastic. You can see all of those sessions in our new studio resource. They are organized by instrument and topic, and check out some of the ones that he has done prior to today. They include a bass style series, an approach to playing swing, funk, and more, an approach to playing Brazilian and Latin grooves. He did a technical session with us from pickups and amps to technique and more. Kicked off the sessions back in May with a history of rhythm section focus with his colleagues from La Lucha, and more recently did a really wonderful session on musical composition approaches and ideas. They are all there for you to listen to or watch in our studio resource or through our Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions podcast, wherever you stream your music. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Alejandro and turn it over to him for today's section on harmony. Big thank you to Blue Water Wealth Management at Steward Partners and Marine Max Clearwater for helping to present our online resources. And of course, the Al Downey Tampa Bay Jazz Association for supporting Clearwater Jazz Holiday education and outreach. Alejandro was born in Colombia, where he started his musical career playing flamenco and classical guitar. He picked up the bass while he attended college in Bogota, where he performed in the salsa and Andean music ensembles, as well as the school's orchestra. During his high school years, he performed with different independent bands, ranging across the board from a variety of different styles. I love it here, Alejandro, whenever I see the reference to heavy metal. Have you ever taken your upright bass and just smashed it on the stage?
No, I can't afford it.
Well,
I've wanted to smash it for different reasons, but
right, not that. That seems like an out-of-box La Lucha kind of thing to do. Maybe we can invest like in a fake one that you can just surprise the audience one night.
There you go.
Bring out your heavy metal roots into your jazz performance. Upon graduating high school, Alejandro moved to Gainesville, and there he worked as a freelance musician while being exposed to different genres such as reggae, jazz, and funk. He earned an AA in music studies from Santa Fe Community College, where he worked unpacking books in the morning, studying during the day, and playing gigs by night. And in the midst of this chaotic time in his life, he developed a deep love for jazz, which drove him to learn to play the upright bass. He holds a bachelor's of music in jazz performance and a master's of music from the University of South Florida. During his studies at USF, he toured Italy, France, Germany with the Jazz Ensemble One and the Jazz Tet, performing at different jazz festivals. In addition to being an adjunct professor for the Mira program at St. Petersburg College, he is also very active as a versatile performer working with many artists. He also co-leads the award-winning group La Lucha, who, by the way, has a somewhat recent new album out that everyone definitely should check out. Is it called Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Alejandro?
That's right, yep.
Yes, and we talked a little bit about it on earlier sessions. It's really wonderful, and please check it out where you stream your music or buy your music. And with that, Alejandro, I'm going to turn it over to you for today. The stage is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. So today I wanted to talk about harmony from the perspective of the bass, and kind of what the reason I wanted to do this specific topic is because the bass, it's essentially a melodic instrument, even though we don't really perceive it as much as being an instrument that plays the melody of a song very often. Now that has changed in recent years, and guys like Jacko and Victor Wooten and Michael Manring and other guys have really brought up the bass to the forefront and have kind of the bass stands on its own in a very melodic way. It can actually be a very beautiful melodic instrument, especially the fretless bass. But a lot of bass players, especially, oddly enough, the ones that start on the bass, a lot of times they don't have a good foundation or a good knowledge of harmony. So, because it is a melodic instrument. So, and also not only because of it's a melodic instrument, because you have the sax or the trumpet or any other horn, it's also a melodic instrument. But a lot of those players tend to have a very good grasp of harmony. The difference with bass players is that we're kind of used to playing the root of the chord, so just the foundation. So a lot of the times, just playing one note from that belongs in a chord can let us get away with a lot of things. In other words, you can play the root on a C chord. That's gonna sound like a C, but we don't know if that's a major chord, that's a minor chord, a diminished chord. We don't really have any other information other than that. So yes, the bass plays a very important role in the sense of defining what the chord is going to sound like, because it's the lowest note of the chord, and that's what's going to define whatever happens in between or from then on up, if you want to think about that. That way, let's say then a guitar comes in or a piano, and the piano actually covers a lot of range, but let's think of the bass kind of providing the foundation at the bottom, and then you go up from there in terms of adding notes in the middle that create the harmony, if you will, and then you have the melody somewhere in there too. But just to kind of simplify things a little bit, I wanted to, the hard thing on the bass, the easy thing for a guitar player, for example, is the guitar player can play chords. Now, bass players can play chords too, but they just don't sound as good because of the range. So a lot of the issues with the bass is precisely that, the range. You're at the very bottom. You can take two notes that are dissonant, let's see, I'm going to just show an example. You can play, I'm going to play a minor second, which is a fairly dissonant sound. Now I'm going to play it down here. What I'm doing is I'm playing the 4th fret and then the open A. So I'm playing an A flat and an A at the same time. Right, that doesn't sound great. Now what I'm going to try to do is going to do the same thing, but in a different area of the bass. So I'm kind of stretching my fingers here, playing an A flat here and an A here at the top. Still dissonant, but it's, I don't know, this is just mud, right? This is a little bit cleaner. So basically what ends up happening is as you go up, here I can do it a little bit higher. It's kind of not in camera, but right, it's still dissonant. It still clashes, but as you go up, that dissonant kind of becomes more, I don't know, I would say obvious in a sense. And by the same token, if I play a low A and a high A flat, all of a sudden it's not quite as bad. I wouldn't say that's a pleasing sound, but depending on the context, you can make it sound like that. But in any case, my point being, you're more limited in terms of what notes you can play in the lower register of the bass that are not the root or the foundation of the chord. So a good way to start understanding harmony from the perspective of the bass is arpeggios. So arpeggios are basically a broken chord. You take each note of the chord. So by definition, harmony is the sound of two or more notes played at the same time. So technically, if I play this, that's not harmony, that's melody. But it is an interval that can fit within harmony. And that's how bass players usually have to basically think about bass players having to outline harmony in a way. So a good way to kind of think about that from the perspective of the bass is, like I said, arpeggios. And a diatonic, well, a good exercise is actually, this is kind of jumping from a very basic understanding to a little bit more, not necessarily advanced, but I'm not going to fill in a lot of gaps. There's a lot of information out there that a lot of theory books and a lot of different stuff that you can go and check out with some of the basics of how some of this stuff comes together. But I wanted to kind of touch on some stuff that I've worked on that has helped me to understand harmony from the bass perspective. So diatonic, the term diatonic means in the key. So usually in music we talk about keys. The key provides us with a certain tonality for a song or a piece, whatever it is that you're playing. Sometimes we depart from the key. Sometimes we stay within the key. Depends on the style of music, depends on the composition. There's a lot of, the only music breaks a lot of rules, and there's not one set thing, and then through the ages things have changed. But in any case, the term diatonic means in the key, and I'm going to talk a little bit about diatonic chord progressions. So if you have the key of C major, and Steve, I don't know if you can let me share something really quick on the screen.
Sure, Alejandro, I just clicked the button that should enable you to do that.
Perfect. Let me know if this shows up okay, and that there's nothing embarrassing showing up from my... I don't think I have anything embarrassing.
Yeah, it looks good. We can see it, and then we can see you as well.
Perfect. So basically what you see here on the screen is, it says diatonic chord progression in a major key. The capital M indicates a major chord, lowercase m indicates a minor chord, and the IM diminished indicates a diminished chord. So again, without getting into too many basics of this stuff, I wanted to indicate that this is the order. When you play a scale, a C major scale has no sharps, no flats, so this is what the scale sounds like. Right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Basically, you can create a chord for each one of those notes in the scale. And that's what creates a diatonic chord progression. So in other words, there's certain rules that you follow in order to create chord. Basically, you're stacking them in thirds. But again, I'm not going to get too deep into that. I'm just going to show this exercise. I'm going to play this to see what it sounds. So I'm going to play right underneath, as you see, an uppercase 1, Roman numeral 1. This is major 7. Then lowercase Roman numeral 2. This is minor 7. So anything that's, if you see, it corresponds with the uppercase letters and the lowercase. And basically this just indicates that it's minor. This applies to any key. So we're thinking of keys in numbers right now. I'm just using C major as an example because it's easiest to think of, but this can go for any key. So basically my first chord is a C major 7 in the key of C. That's the sound of the C major 7 chord. That's a D minor 7 chord. E minor 7 chord. F major 7 chord. So we're on the 4 right now. We're going to the 5. So this is a G7. Now I'm going to go to an A minor 7, which is the 6. And now I'm going to play a B minor 7 flat 5. Now you will notice here that it says diminished. And really this part up here is referring to the triads. A triad is just the root, third, and the fifth of the chord. It doesn't include the 7. But it's the foundation of what it is that we're doing. And I'll go talk about that in a second. But here you have the 7, minor 7 flat 5. 7th scale degree, which is B. And minor 7, we play a minor 7 with a diminished fifth. That's what the flat 5 stands for. This chord is also known as a half diminished. Again, I could talk about the theory of this all day long, but that's not kind of what I want to do here. I want to kind of stick to the bass specifically. So, and then B minor 7 flat 5. And then you can close it out by going right to the C major 7. Now, if you notice, I went up the octave. Right, so you can kind of hear, excuse my singing. So you can hear the scale. So you can kind of hear the scale as it goes up. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so you can see the bass a little bit bigger. So I'm basically following from the electric bass perspective. This is kind of an easier exercise because the patterns are easier to visualize. Again, kind of the purpose of this is to show, it's really more about ear training than really learning to play these exercises. What I mean by this is that what you should be getting out of these exercises when you play them on your own is really what those chord progressions sound like when they're broken like that. Now, there's a lot of different variations to play this exercise. So you can play one arpeggio ascending, the other one descending. So what I did there, I played C major 7 ascending, so C, E, G, B, and then the D minor 7 descending. And now E minor 7 ascending, F major 7 descending. Now notice when I go up, when I play the descending pattern, I'm starting on the 7th of the chord that I'm descending on. So in other words, going back to C major 7, I end on the 7th of the C, and the closest note is the C, which now becomes the 7th of the minor 7, of the D minor 7. So I'm not necessarily playing each one of those starting on the root. And that's fine, you know, but sometimes that's going to be useful from the bass perspective. Now, going back a little bit without dealing, again, this is a great exercise from a technique standpoint and hearing it. So taking this through different keys is also great. So for example, I'm going to play in the key of G. Or sorry, I'm going to play just ascending. And then change the fingering a little bit there just to jump down here. Again, that's exactly the same thing that I play. So just to recap, I play G major 7, A minor 7, B minor 7, C major 7, D 7, E minor 7, F sharp half diminished or minor 7 flat 5, and back to my G major 7. So that's a great way of kind of hearing what chord progressions sound like. Now, the downside of this exercise is that you're not really practicing chord progressions in a very realistic way. What I mean by that is this. This is great because you are covering a lot of ground harmonically. Because really, harmony, you can see a lot of kind of complicated chords, but the foundation of those chords is all found within these qualities. The major 7, right, only has a few different alterations that you can put on that, like a sharp 4. You know, on the bass, you're kind of limited unless you start playing those things in more octaves. And again, and I'll kind of tie this in from the perspective of walking bass lines. But yes, there's only so many notes that you can play within a bar. So if you're not, unless you're playing a bunch of 16 notes within a bar, you can include everything that you can in there. But you likely will be fired from the gig if that's what you're doing as a bass player on a gig. Or not. Who am I to say that? So, yes, so you're limited to the number of notes that you can play. So the foundation of that chord is the most important part. So kind of what I just played, which is root, 3rd, 5th, and 7. Now you can expand that. Again, I don't want to get too deep into harmony theory. Now, the other way that you can approach this is just, well, to think of this from a realistic chord progression. So so what I mean by that is that you can take an existing song. I'm going to open something here. I'm going to share something else in just a second. You can take an existing song and just play arpeggios through the song, through the chord progression of the song, because ultimately there's not a lot of songs that stick to a diatonic chord progression throughout the whole thing, because it would just sound kind of like you're just playing an exercise. It's a lot of that's kind of the way a lot of when you play a straight scale, that's what it sounds like. It kind of sounds like, oh, you're just running a scale. And the idea of playing music is that you're playing something that's heartfelt, and yes, with the meat and potatoes are all found within the scales and the arpeggios and all that stuff, but ultimately, you're trying to express something musically. So when you're playing, a good way to practice, do that exercise, take it to a different extent as a bass player, is to, like I said, do it through chord progression. So I'm going to share with you on the screen now the chord changes for All the Things You Are, famous standard. I'll talk about standards in a second. Here you go. Can you guys see that okay? So basically, what happens with this song is that it actually goes through a few different keys. Again, I'm not going to analyze this necessarily, but let's take the idea of the minor 7, major 7, dominant, and half diminished chords like we saw in the diatonic chord progression. And you're basically going to find all of those here with a couple of exceptions. So, for example, the first 4 bars is F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7. So the way I can practice those as a bass player, if I don't know what the song sounds like, if they just give me this in the middle of the, not the gig, but if somebody just sends this to me without any reference to a melody, the very least I can do is play through the arpeggios so I know what the chord progression sounds like. So F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7. So those are the first 4 bars, right? F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7. And I'm basically using the same knowledge of that I took from that diatonic chord progression. Like I said, the cool thing about learning the diatonic chord progression is that you can actually use them in all 12 different keys. You can practice them on all 12 different keys because it's not going to change. Now, those are a little bit easier on the electric bass because of the way the fingerings work. On the upright bass, you have to do a couple more shifts, but that's something that you should practice anyway. That's great advice that I can think of. I always used to get mad or looking at upright bass books. A lot of them would give me only one sample of fingerings, and I would get mad because I'm like, oh, just tell me what fingerings to use. But then I realized that a big part of developing and knowing the instrument is actually developing your own fingerings. So yes, don't. A lot of the times when you find fingerings in books, they're just to get you started. But always try to figure out a lot of this stuff on your own. I highly suggest that. It takes more time, but I think it helps you learn the instrument better and learn the concept behind what you're trying to practice a little bit better. So again, F minor 7. I'll play now the next 4 bars, which are D flat major 7, D minor 7, G7, C major 7. So you'll notice now that there's 2 chords in this bar. The second bar, so it's D minor 7 to a G7. So now I don't have what I was doing before. We're going to think about it this way. I'm playing quarter notes. So 1, 2, I'm going to start from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'll go to D flat major 7. Now, what I did there, when I have those 2 chords, since I'm playing quarter notes, if I'm playing in time, I'm just going to play 2 notes. And what I'm going to prioritize is the third. So root, so I play the D, the F, which is the minor third, and then G, which is the root, and then the major third, which is the third of the G7. So I didn't outline the whole chord there because, again, I was trying to play this in a more musical way where I'm sticking to quarter notes, and there's only 4 quarter notes I can include there, so that means 2 quarter notes per chord. So that's a great way to actually practice that. And then once you kind of learn, once you kind of hear the harmony, here I'm going to play the next 4 bars without context. I'm just going to play the B section. which is C minor 7, F minor 7, B flat 7, E flat major 7, A flat major 7, A, C, D, F sharp, G major 7. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because you're basically taking the exact same chord progression from the top, but now you're playing it in a different key. So the relationship between these 8 chords up here, or sorry, 8 bars, is exactly the same between these, but in a different context. In other words, because we've now changed keys, this is giving us a completely different, a different sound of the same chord progression. So that's an example of how you can, I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but that's an example of how you can explore this. Now, how you can start, so now if you think about it, now I'm basically just playing a walking bass line. So a walking bass line is really ultimately, well, in jazz, beyond jazz, I think learning to play walking bass lines is extremely important because it helps you learn how to connect the chords very effectively. Regardless of style or anything that you're playing. That stuff still works. So one exercise that I'm going to try it now is I'm going to play from the top. I'm going to play 1 chord ascending and 1 chord descending. Now I'm going to descend from the root 2. Unlike the exercise that I did before where I was descending from the 7th, I'm just going to descend from the root. For example, I'm going to play F minor 7 ascending and then B flat minor 7 descending. So F minor 7, and now B flat minor 7 descending. So I end up playing root or octave, 7th, 5th, 3rd. So that gives me a very different sound. E flat 7 ascending, A flat major 7 descending, D flat major 7 ascending. Now I changed that a little bit here. So that, since I'm limited to 2 notes per chord on this too, what I did D ascending and then G descending, but instead of playing the 7th, I played the 3rd like I did before. Remember, I had done D, F, G, B. In this case, what I did D, F the same way, but then G, B, playing the low B. And that's a very cool thing that changes the sound completely. So what I did there, I also played the low E on the C, which is the 3rd. Again, the notes in the C major 7 chord are C, E, G, B. And just by changing the order or the octave in which I'm playing that chord progression, that gives me kind of a cool different sound. So once you learn what the chord sounds like, explore where the chord tones are in any position. So not only from the root up. That's also a kind of a downside of this exercise, that you get used to playing from the root up, but a lot of the times you're going to be doing things in different ways. You're not always going to be playing, again, musically, you don't just hear people just playing arpeggios over and over and over. There's a lot of different things. You play a portion of a scale, if you want to break it down that way. Ultimately, you're just using what your ear learns from practicing stuff like this, and then you put it in a very musical way. That's the point of doing this whole thing. So I would recommend, I'll stop sharing the screen there. So one thing, kind of like to start closing the argument of harmony for the bass player. As a bass player, like I mentioned at the beginning, you kind of get stuck in this, not stuck, sorry, I'm using negative connotations. Your role is a foundational role most of the time, which means, again, you're playing the root of the chord. So what you play at the bottom defines what's played at the top. I'll use a quick example here. A minor, for example, the more notes you add to a chord, the more overlapping notes you have. So in other words, if you have a C, an A minor 7 chord has practically the same notes as a C major 7 chord. They're not all the same, but they have a lot of overlapping notes, specifically C, E, and G. If you play an A on the bass while somebody else is playing like a C major chord, that may make that chord sound like an A minor chord. And that may not necessarily what the person is looking at doing. In fact, a quick story of when I was very green playing gigs. I used to play with Buster Cooper of Duke Ellington fame, and he played with everybody. He was a native of St. Petersburg and retired here. And the gig was bass, trombone, and drums. So there was no harmonic instrument. And one day he just started playing one tune. He didn't tell me what it was. He just started playing this song. The drummer obviously knew it. It was my second gig with him. And I was frantically trying to figure out what it was. And then I realized I was hearing in D minor, but the song was actually in F major, and which is the relative major of D minor, or you want to think about that. In any case, I just completely heard the song in a completely different way. And I remember I asked somebody, I think it was Dwayne White actually, Al Downing, and I said like, "Hey man, what was that song?" And he said like, "Oh, it was Sometimes I'm Happy." I'm like, "What key was that in?" I used my ears and I managed to get through it, but immediately I wrote it down and went and learned it. Which brings me to the next point. Part of the reason we do this is because as bass players, we're going to find ourselves in situations like that quite often in jazz. We are going to be expected to know hundreds and hundreds of songs. Be it that you're playing with a singer that's going to call it in any key you may never have played it in, or a sax player or a trombone player who tend to play very different songs. So being a supportive instrument, that's what you're going to find yourself doing that a lot of the time. You may not find yourself playing the melody a lot of the time, which is actually something that's beneficial to learning more songs. What I mean is you should learn the melody, but sometimes you don't have enough time in the day to actually learn to play the melody effectively or very well. And certain songs are very hard to play on the bass too, which I do encourage you to try to do, because that's really good. But a lot of the times, you're given very little notice. And one thing I highly suggest to deal with situations like that, the most important thing for you as a bass player to know is the chord progression of the song. Again, it all relates to this. So the good news is that the more standards you learn, the more you realize that there's a lot of chord progressions that repeat themselves throughout a lot of these standards. So your ear starts getting trained to hearing those other chord progressions, or specific sections within sections, if you will. So, you start finding the similar things within, like Girl from Ipanema and Take the A Train, for example, and stuff like that. So you start figuring out that kind of, it's not just that every song is unique, of course, but there's a lot of chord progressions that repeat within that. I think I mentioned this in my composition masterclass, where the melody is really what makes the song unique. And yes, you can use a lot of different harmony to enhance that melody. But basically, as a bass player, you're going to be required to know the chord progression. So if you play a lot of these exercises and your ears get trained to learning how to hear that, you will be in a good spot. One thing that I suggest doing is actually singing the melody or humming the melody out loud while playing the roots of the bass, of the chord. So in other words, you don't have to play the entire chord progression, but one thing, the example of all the things you are, I have, so excuse my singing again, but that's a really good exercise. Then the next part, which is basically the same thing as I mentioned earlier. It's the same chord progression, but in a different key. The melody actually doesn't change. So that exercise is really good to do, because you're learning the melody, you are aware of the melody. You may not be able to play it, but at least you are playing the two very important parts of the melody, which is the foundation of the harmony. Again, if you notice, I'm just playing the root. So I'm using my reference, the melody as a reference to see what the bass sounds like. So the cool thing with that is then you start understanding the bass from a perspective of, you kind of go back and think it linearly, which is that you understand the bass movement. So the bass movement is exactly what I just did. I almost hear the bass movement as a melody on its own. Oh, sorry. So I hear that as almost like a counter melody to the melody. Right? Very simple, but being able to hear that bass movement, which is mainly intervals, and a lot of these chord progressions are just the moving fourths and fifths. So understanding that is also very important, because like I said, chord progressions just change. They don't change a lot. They're functional, and even if there's something slightly different in a chord progression, then you'll be able to say, okay, I know most of what it sounds like. For example, All the Things You Are. One thing that's tricky is that a lot of people want to hear that second chord as a B flat 7, because it kind of sounds like a 2-5-1 to start, but it's actually a B flat minor 7. So if you are able to kind of know those things, then you can, I believe in just kind of getting rid of unnecessary information and focusing on the stuff that's most important, or that the stuff that makes a certain chord progression unique or a song unique, and saying, okay, I got to remember everything else the same except for this chord. So that's a really good way to approach this. And so to kind of close it out, really try to think of, anytime you're learning a new song, I would highly suggest look at the chord progression and just outline the chord progression, just playing arpeggios. That way you can hear what it sounds like. Oh, and one quick thing. This is kind of, it's easier to do on the electric bass, but sometimes just taking the major third or the minor third of a chord, you can play a double stop in tenths. So for example, this is what the double stop looks on a major chord. So I'm playing a G major, G and B. Again, it's technically not a full chord, but I'm playing the major third. That's an A minor, B minor, C major, oops, D major, A minor, F sharp minor, G major. So you actually kind of hear a little bit of the scale there, right? So you can kind of hear that, and it's kind of a variation of the that I showed you at the beginning. Obviously less notes, but you can hear that chord progression even, right? Guess a song that starts similar to that is Blackbird by the Beatles. So again, well, and that's something I was actually, now that I think about it, don't be afraid of using reference points of existing songs as a way to learn something that is apparently new. Because in a new context, you may think of it like, oh, this is jazz, so it's not, oh, wait, there's a similarity to Blackbird by the Beatles or whatever, in this case. Not that I was playing jazz. In any case. So yeah, outline the chord progression in a new song so you learn to hear what that song sounds like. And then, of course, learn the melody, but learn to, and sometimes once you get very familiar with chord changes, you may just go straight to the melody, because sometimes then you start hearing chord progressions without necessarily having to play them. One exercise that I like to do as well is when I'm driving, I try to do this very carefully. I used to commute from St. Pete to USF in Tampa, and the traffic was awful. So I was stuck in traffic a lot of the time. So what I would do is that if I was learning a new standard, I would put a recording on, then have just a piece of paper on the side. I wouldn't even have to look at the piece of paper, but I would just by ear try to figure out what the chord progression was. And a lot of the times I just started with learning the bass movement, like I said, or whatever chord progression. And then I would just compare to see how close I got to doing that. And it was like ear training that was very, very useful to me. And that actually helped me a lot through gigs and doing stuff like that, because your ears get faster at recognizing those things. So again, learn a lot of tunes. Good way to approach it from a bass perspective if you don't have anybody playing chords. And even if you do, I think just outlining the chord progression with simpler pages is really good. Of course, study the harmony and a lot of the theory. Like I said, I didn't cover a lot of theory in this, but you should go check it out. There's a good book. It's a good reference book. It's somewhat controversial in a sense, because some people don't agree with all the information, but I've never seen a theory book that wasn't controversial. It's theory after all. And it's called the Jazz Theory Book by Mark Levine. He has a good way to kind of break it down. And, again, you explore and you learn things on your own. And he has some really good recorded examples that you can check out there. And there's a ton of different stuff, too. There's more advanced theory books. And explore those things. But, again, kind of, to me, a really good way to explore this is to do it yourself. Because you really learn to understand the concept of what it is that you're playing and you're trying to accomplish. So bass players, understand harmony. It's really good. It will allow you to play more functional bass lines. And really, it will allow everybody else to fall into place a lot easier, a lot better, or more effectively. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. Again, I can talk about this for hours, but I don't think this is the time or place.
Oh, you can talk for hours if you want, Alejandro. We'll let you get it all off your chest. Hey man, this was great. Another really, really, really cool session. And as a reminder to folks, please check out some of Alejandro's other sessions in our studio resource. He's done a few of them, and he'll be back. He'll be back soon on another topic about reimagining music. Alejandro, what are you calling that one? Something about sort of reimagining tunes?
Yes, arranging and having fun with existing tunes. So how to take an existing composition, like a jazz standard or a pop song or a polka, and reinventing it in a way that you can make it your own without completely destroying it and making it seem unrecognizable to the casual listener.
Very cool. Well, check out under the upcoming sessions on our education and outreach page at clearwaterjazz.com. You can see all the upcoming sessions, including the one Alejandro is talking about, and the Zoom information to join. And after the sessions, these get archived in our studio resource, arranged by instrument and topic. And if you're so inclined, we launched a new program recently around the history of jazz that complements a program we do throughout the school system and with special groups in the area called the History of Jazz Outreach Program. So we have this online resource now called the Stop Time series with Frank Williams, and it's a comprehensive video and audio history of jazz told in Frank's one-of-a-kind style and in small doses. So these videos and audio sessions are anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes long. You can watch them on our website and follow along, or you can listen to them on the Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions podcast now, wherever you stream your music. So it's a fun way to learn about the history of jazz. And we're excited about these online resources becoming available for students and band directors in Florida and beyond who are working to establish the new normal curriculum of playing together and learning. So we're happy to be a part of that. And Alejandro, I'm happy that you're a part of it. So thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Always fun.
All right, everybody. Stay safe out there. Be well. Keep playing. And we'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.